ConsenSys split into two organizations. And I'm not sure everyone kind of knows about that. There's CSI, the software business. Then there's Mesh, which actually includes Decrypt. So I should say that off the bat, although Joe and I don't get to talk much. Just explain to everyone, the different portfolio companies and how they're divided now, because that's still relatively new at ConsenSys.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. So ConsenSys started in early 2015. We at the Ethereum Foundation. Not loud enough? Can you make it louder, please? Test. Is that much better? Still not better? Test.
We should just scream. Oh, I'm going to give Joe my mic.
Test.
My mic is much louder.
Thank you. Oh my God. That's good. That's power.
Yeah.
Well, we can move this back and forth. Okay, so early 2015, a bunch of us on the Ethereum project realized that Ethereum was getting close to launching version 1 of the network, and I and others felt that we should set up some companies and try to figure out how to build decentralized applications, what smart contracts really were, what sort of technology you needed to build smart contracts. So I started gathering people from around the world, philosophically aligned people, anybody who had some capability and was interested in the space. And there weren't a lot of people back then who were available and appropriate. So we started doing lots of experiments. We tried to build some applications. We realized, hey, it's really hard to build decentralized applications with no developer tools, with effectively no ecosystem around you. And so we built a dApp store. The person who built the dApp store put some scripts together, and a year later that turned into what's called Truffle Developer Tool Suite. The Infura team started because we were setting up all these different test nets for our own projects, for our own teams to try to build something on. And then that evolved into a test net inside of ConsenSys, and then we essentially offered that to the world, and it turned into an infrastructure, a major infrastructure element. And Metamask had a similar sort of start. So fast forward a few years, ConsenSys Mesh, the original mothership company, had made lots of investments, owned lots of equity in many different projects, owned lots of tokens in many different projects, had spun out many different projects, projects like Gnosis, some pretty sizable entities at this point. 3Box is another great project that we spun out, and we continue to spin them out. But we were getting to the point where the ecosystem was opened up, and we played a big role in that. We also noticed that several of our projects inside of ConsenSys Mesh had coalesced into a blockchain stack. So we had our Ethereum client at the base, we had Infura, we had Metamask, the user interface, we had our software developer tool suite and customer success group. We had a group called Codify that was building DeFi applications. And they really wanted to be a tightly integrated software product company. And so we spun that out to be the product-focused company, and ConsenSys Mesh continues to incubate different projects, including Decrypt, continues to spin out projects, and it manages a pretty sizable portfolio at this point.
Let's drill down a little more with MetaMask. Who in the audience uses MetaMask? Oh, yeah. Now,
wow.
MetaMask is not the only Chrome browser Ethereum wallet out there. Talk to us about MetaMask's growth, which the numbers have really, really multiplied big. We just covered your recent fundraise. A lot of that was due to the growth of MetaMask, but there's also more competitors than before. Talk to us a little bit about the competitive landscape and how you think MetaMask can maintain its lead.
Yeah, so MetaMask has been the most utilized non-custodial wallet in the ecosystem for a very long time. Non-custodial basically means that you're fully in control of your assets. You're not relying on an organization like Coinbase to essentially custody your assets for you. MetaMask has always been assiduously focused on security. So essentially bringing the best possible security thinking to a very complicated context. And it is moving towards a world of very granular security so that it can be essentially your user interface to the entire decentralized web, but also potentially to the less decentralized web, to Web 2 applications. It takes an unopinionated approach to how it offers itself. It's basically a free wallet, fully featured wallet, and it doesn't tell you how to do DeFi, or it doesn't tell you how to do certain things with NFTs. There are some wallets that are very opinionated and provide some workflows already. But instead, it enables essentially all of the developers out in the world to integrate quite easily with MetaMask. And so really the developers, like thousands of applications, are MetaMask's best sales force, because MetaMask is the project that they integrate with first. We announced 21 million monthly actives about 10 days ago, and the number just keeps going up. So we're actually significantly beyond that at this point. It is the major user interface for consumers. We also have an institutional version of it. And so lots of institutional clients are signed up to get some institutional niceties, reporting, and other elements in workflow. Essentially, we are continuing to add financial primitives. So you can buy tokens in MetaMask. You can swap tokens in MetaMask. And it's one of the major swapping engines or capabilities on the planet. And we are an aggregator. So we sit on top of lots of decentralized finance primitives, and we can take the best elements of those primitives and put a uniform user interface on that and essentially provide best execution to consumers. And so, sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned the institutional version of MetaMask. Let's talk about institutions a little bit. ConsenSys just recently had a fundraise, pretty big round, led by JPM. So when you look at a few years back...
That was the previous one.
Okay,
yeah.
But JP Morgan, pretty big investor, right?
So they're not a small investor, but yeah,
so when you talk about institutions...
They're under 10%.
Let's get into that a little bit. Like,
sure.
You know, institutional adoption of DeFi is something that we've heard talked about for a few years. People kept saying, it's coming, it's coming. You know, Mike Novogratz famously was saying, the herd is coming. And then quite recently, he was on a panel saying, okay, the herd is here. Do you feel that way, that we have hit a tipping point, a moment where, you know, institutions, the types that are more cautious and stayed away from crypto, really are jumping in now? Yeah.
So traditionally, the crypto space has been significantly retail-led, significantly led by consumers. And early on, there were some institutions, smaller hedge funds that could be agile and make riskier decisions. And some institutions dabbled with cryptocurrency for a while, taking it in payment for goods and services. But really, that was about just gaining business, and they would trade into fiat currency pretty quickly. What we are seeing is institutions are taking crypto and they're keeping crypto on balance sheet. Michael Saylor does a really good job evangelizing that for Bitcoin, and we're seeing that quite significantly in the Ethereum ecosystem as well. So MetaMask Institutional provides a whole bunch of functionality that institutions need, and it's initially interesting to financial trader types, crypto financial hedge funds, but increasingly we expect to see more traditional enterprises, just businesses that use crypto in their day-to-day and want to hold crypto on balance sheet. The mad rush is on. I would agree with that. And even entities like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, et cetera, are, in my opinion, this is not an official statement, are FOMOing at the mouth to try to get into our ecosystem. But they're regulated, massively regulated banking institutions. And so it's not going to be easy for them to do that sort of thing. And some of those investors have told us, not JP Morgan specifically, have told us that investing in ConsenSys is a bit of a proxy to getting into the ecosystem.
All right, so the mad rush is on, and institutions are FOMOing at the mouth.
Especially with that old money dying or depreciating quite significantly, and with this new sounder money and soon to be ultrasound money, both growing in value exponentially and also yielding quite significantly. So it's institutions as well as people like getting yield. So they like getting a little interest on their money, and so it appears that we're at the end of a major monetary debt cycle, a major monetary regime, and the old money is depreciating and it's not yielding very much. And so there's a lot of reason for the old money to be traded in increasingly large numbers, increasingly quickly for this new sounder money in this economy that's been growing adjacent to the old economy for 11 years now.
Let's talk about the ultrasound money. Always fun when we can discuss recent news or recent events. And for everyone in the room, they probably remember just a few weeks ago, there was a weekend in which crypto Twitter went ablaze over Ethereum gas fees. All of you raise your hands over having used Metamask, so I imagine you also have noticed that sometimes those gas fees are pretty damn high. So there was a big debate over Ethereum's usability. Have the gas fees gotten out of control? You know, does this keep newcomers out? What is your take on kind of the state of Ethereum and its usability, especially as more competitors and challenger networks like Solana come around and say, you know, we're faster and we're cheaper?
Yeah, so high gas fees are a measure of success. They're a growth pain. They are something that essentially can't be avoided. When a new technology becomes successful, it always has scaling issues. So whether it's CPU cycles or screen real estate or memory, you're basically going to have software engineers max out the capabilities of the technology, and it turns out that we're having consumers max out the capability of the technology. Ethereum and Bitcoin have always focused assiduously on maximizing decentralization. And we've been in a world of what we call monolithic blockchains since the start. Monolithic blockchains have three major elements, all in the same architecture. So they have security in the form of decentralization. They have execution, running programs through something like the Ethereum virtual machine, and they have data availability. So there are different kinds of data that these programs need. What we're moving into is a world of modular blockchains where we can start to get really efficient about how those different functionalities are architected with respect to one another. So as Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2 merge, which we believe will be Q2, possibly slipping into Q3 next year, we're going to see security achieved, as it always has been, by Ethereum, effectively layer 1 and layer 2, the ConsenSys system. We're already seeing scalability happen at layer 2, and at layer 2 we're seeing hundreds and soon tens of thousands of transactions per second that are actually very inexpensive. So they're their Solana inexpensive, their Avalanche inexpensive. And Avalanche itself is even, as it, those are both cool systems, by the way, Solana and Avalanche. And as they get more utilized by consumers, we're seeing transactions creep up to $1 and $2 for those technologies. So Ethereum is going to be the blockchain of blockchains. It's going to be the major digital asset settlement layer. It's going to be a coordination layer for many different layer 2 technologies, many of which are already rolled out or rolling out pretty quickly. And the layer 1s that have not paid much attention to decentralization, they are likely going to either have to figure out a way to get massively decentralized before people will trust them with valuable assets, or they will figure out a way to just get their security from Ethereum. Solana, I believe, pays $1 billion a year or something like that in tokens for transaction fees of maybe $40 million per year. That is not a sustainable business model for a blockchain. So what they're very likely to do is jump onto Ethereum and get their security for free. And all of these different execution environments have different characteristics. So just like databases, SQL databases, graph databases, NoSQL databases have different characteristics for different kinds of applications. We want a variety of these execution environments to all connect together in the Web 2 architecture.
Is ETH2 going to make using Ethereum less expensive?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ethereum 2 brings much greater decentralization. Proof of stake is much less expensive than proof of work. There'll be hundreds of thousands of validators. There already are approaching 200,000 validators. And the barrier to entry to validate is very, very low. So anybody will be able to do it. And there'll be inexpensive and easy ways to do it. The next phase after the merge is to bring data shards online. Essentially, the layer 2 systems, all these execution environments that run programs, they need guaranteed data availability in order to be able to prove that something actually happened, or in order to work through fraud proofs. And so the more guaranteed data availability we have in Ethereum 2, it's a complicated topic, the more layer 2s we'll be able to have. And so and there are different kinds of data availability. Some of it is guaranteed to be available. Some of it is a sort of bring your own data kind of situation. And the more of that that comes online, the faster we move to 100,000 transactions per second. And then effectively, it's an infinite architecture because you can layer further and you can add more shards. So we're moving from a world of 30 transactions per second in this first implementation monolithic system to a world in which it's appropriately modularized, just the way technologists like to do when things get more sophisticated.
I have a fun one for you, Joe. You are a co-founder of Ethereum. Vitalik, who everyone in this room knows, relatively recently tweeted out, someone asked him, does he have a regret? And he said he regrets having so many co-founders of Ethereum. Was he taking a shot at anyone in particular? What did you make of that comment?
So I think the general interpretation of that is that he wrote a white paper in November 2013, and he was a very young individual. He was a great writer at Bitcoin Magazine. He already had significant prominence. And even when he delivered the white paper at the end of January in 2014, there was a massive room, bigger than this, filled, and at the back it was like 4 people deep. So it was highly anticipated, and essentially so many people glommed onto this idea. I spoke to him on January 1st, 2014. I read the paper that night, and it basically represented to me a way that we could get the mission that I read into the Bitcoin white paper that we could get it done so much faster because it's just a much more programmatically expressive system. And so because we were all attracted to this project, there weren't job interviews. It was just a whole bunch of crazy people, and it was an ecosystem of people who were disillusioned by how centralization was going, how top-down command and control had taken society to a certain point of capability and functionality, and for the last few millennia, centralized systems have done amazing things, but they're also really broken in very many ways. And so we all realized that this new organizing principle, decentralization, could enable us to re-architect things in much healthier ways. And so the people who were paying attention to that stuff were an odd lot of people, some very talented people, and some people who might consider themselves crypto anarchists, for instance. And so it was a self-selected group, and we worked reasonably well together, given that we were a self-selected group. We drew in about 100 people, maybe even more, throughout the first year of the project. Again, self-selected, we weren't interviewing. And so there were certainly lots of disputes, but the mission was so important, the technology was so powerful, and Vitalik was a very good leader for such a young individual that we all held it together and we delivered Ethereum 1.0.
It's a good story. We only have a few minutes left with Joe. There's two other topics I want to bring up. The first is DAOs. Everyone know about DAOs? Constitution DAO, that got a lot of headlines. Joe, you were just mentioning that there were a lot of problems with centralized systems. I mentioned the recent ConsenSys fundraise. The Lao, which is a prominent DAO, was one of the participants. What are the possibilities, but also the limitations of DAOs right now? Because the other thing we're starting to see at Decrypt is there's a lot of organizations out there announcing themselves saying, we're a DAO. And then if you kind of drill down, well, it's 3 people in a Discord. Is that really a DAO? But it has become the buzzword of the moment.
Yeah, well, I think almost everything starts out centralized, and so you've got to progressively decentralize. So the big idea is that we should recognize that power has always been with the people. It's just that we didn't have the mechanisms to enable people to organize themselves well and govern in a really broad way. And essentially these vertical systems were available to us because that's the only technology we could figure out. And so whether it's political capital that's gathered up from the population or monetary capital, it gets gathered into this vertical system, and the governance of the vertical system has to be pretty narrow. And then the vertical system creates some new value from all the capital that it's collected, and it forgets to distribute it all back to the people.
You're kidding.
Exactly. And so we have these new mechanisms, decentralized protocols, where everything's automatic at like the base layer, the base trust foundation. But now we have these governance layers that are more social in nature. And these systems can enable us to make decisions either in a few seconds at the base layer or seconds, minutes, hours at this layer, and you can be enormously decentralized in decision-making and governance. And once you've created some new value, monetary tokenized value based on those decisions, then you can instantly disseminate that value to all the people that contributed.
If everything's going right.
Yeah. So That said, so that's the theory. The reality is that governance is really complicated. Some have described governance recently in DAOs as I think the technical term is shit show. And so what we need to do, and this is happening, we need to build layers of tooling, layers of functionality. So Gnosis Safe has Zodiac, sort of framework of different kinds of functionalities for doing things like managing a decentralized treasury. Tribute, which is the Lao project, they built their own sort of DAO operating system framework with a bunch of different functionalities for forming capital, collecting money, and doing decision making and allocating capital to different projects. So we'll get there. We built governance and political systems in the centralized world for millennia. And they've been getting better and better. Monarchies gave way to nation states. Some of those nation states work better than others. And the beauty is that all of this is being democratized. So in the same way that democracy turned in the form of the internet technology and the web technology, it basically democratized access to information, the ability to publish information, do e-commerce, social networking, etc. That has done amazing things for the world. It's also done some really complicated things for the world. But now we're bringing, in the form of decentralized protocols, we're bringing democracy to the governance layer and to the financial layer of the planet. And that is going to result in a lot of wonderful innovation and a lot of complications. And with each complication, we solve it and we move to the next layer.
I like that, innovation and complications. Last question for Joe Lubin. We haven't even gotten to touch on NFTs. I heard some people at this event care about NFTs. Here's the quick way I'll ask you, Joe. I know that you think NFTs are interesting. There's a lot that you guys are involved in. Palm, which is a new layer that Damien Hirst used for his first NFT drop. What do you say to the many, many NFT skeptics out there who look at these things and they say, oh, I right-clicked and saved it. Now I own it. What is your go-to kind of response to people who kind of dismiss the entire NFT boom?
Well, I don't really try to convince people that NFTs are valuable. If they don't get it, they're going to get it. There are a lot of people who were scoffing at the internet a few years ago. NFTs are a profound innovation in software development. So software is generally made from software objects that are composed into complex solutions. And now we have these software objects that are publicly available on the blockchain that have their own identity. They have their own unique identity. They have their own autonomy in certain cases, or they can be voted on, so people can control their behavior in a decentralized way. They, in turn, can vote on certain things. They can get paid for doing things. They can pay if they want something done. So an NFT can be a DAO, essentially. NFTs can represent things in the physical world, real-world assets. It can be a digital twin of a person or a digital twin of an automobile where you own the automobile through the NFT, but you can also operate the automobile or lend it to somebody and make sure the glove compartment stays locked because you don't trust that person very much. NFTs represent disintermediation of many different commerce worlds. So if you're an artist, traditionally you'd have to work with intermediaries like record companies, lawyers, etc., who would capture the bulk of the value in getting your art, music, film, visuals, to your fan base. With NFTs, you have direct connection. You can have the fan base, the consumers, essentially participate in the artist's business. And so this is going to be a revolution in how commerce is done, but it's also a revolution in how we live. Essentially, we're moving from the world of atoms to the world of bits. We're moving from essentially the business model of the internet being a replication of the 20th century business model, where we just configured products. We would bring atoms together into different configurations and ship them just in time to where they're needed. And then if there wasn't enough need, then advertisers would convince you that you need something else, and you'd ship that. And now we are moving into the world of bits, the world of creativity, the world of education and gamification. And NFTs are, in many cases, going to be some of the elements in those games, in the multiverse, but they're also going to be the way that we represent ourselves. So they are our profile pictures. They are essentially characters that will come alive either in their own right or be animated by people like you and me.
So a lot more than a profile picture. Well, we got to leave it there. Joe Lubin, CEO of ConsenSys, thank you so much.
All right, give it some energy. Woo!